Hi, I'm Melanie, and you're watching Yarn Journeys. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to catch my show. If you, like me, are in the Northern Hemisphere, I hope you are staying cool. It is so hot outside here in the Washington, D.C. area. Several days well into the 90s, and it is humid. But then again, this town was built on a swamp, so what can I expect? Anyway, I hope you are enjoying the weather wherever you are. So, the plan for today's show is to stay local, local to me, that is. We're going to go to Alexandria, Virginia, which is just the next town over from where I am in Arlington. So here's the lineup. So first, we're going to go to the Potomac Fiber Arts Gallery in the Torpedo Factory. Then I'll take you on a tour of Old Town Alexandria, Virginia, where there is plenty of late 18th century, early 19th century charm on display. Then we're going to go to my local yarn shop, the one that I like to go to most frequently, which is Fibre Space. And then finally, we'll go through some show and tell where I take you through my finished objects and works in progress. But before we launch into the main content, so to speak, I'd like to just tell you a little bit more about Alexandria, Virginia. It was founded in the 1750s, mainly as a port serving the tobacco plantations in the surrounding area in Northern Virginia. George Washington's Mount Vernon, for example, is only 10 miles downriver from Alexandria, and he considered the town his hometown, so to speak. The area known as Arlington, Virginia, and Alexandria were both actually within the city limits of Washington, D.C., when it was created as the capital of the newly formed United States of America. So, up until the 1840s, if I was living where I am now, I would have been a DC citizen. But in the 1840s, the country was, of course, gripped in the beginnings of the conflict about slavery, and there was a lot of conversation going on that within the district limits that slaves and slavery should not be going on there. At the time, Alexandria was the main slave trading site for this area of Virginia, and also many plantations within the DC limits, including the Arlington plantation, which belonged to the Lee family. All of those slaves would have had to have been freed. So rather than taking that difficult step, both Alexandria and the area, which is now Arlington County, were accessioned back into the state of Virginia. Of course, within 15 years, the Civil War broke out, and that, thank goodness, brought the end to slavery throughout the country. Until the 1870s or so, this area was known as Alexandria County. But with the foundation of Arlington Cemetery, Alexandria, the town, became its own township, and then the rest of Alexandria County was then named for the new cemetery and became Arlington County. So there's some history for you. Hopefully that's helpful context and it didn't bore you too much along the way. The Potomac Fiber Arts Gallery is within the Torpedo Factory on the Alexandria waterfront. So the Torpedo Factory is actually just that. It's a large building right on the waterfront where the Navy manufactured torpedoes from the end of World War I all the way through World War II. And in fact, inside you can see examples of torpedoes that were created there. In the 1970s, long after the manufacture of torpedoes had ceased, the building became a local arts collective. And inside the Torpedo Factory are the studios and exhibition spaces of many local artists. It's also the home of the Art League, where one can take classes in drawing, painting, ceramics, and other crafts. The Potomac Fiber Arts Gallery, which is the exhibition space of the Potomac Fiber Arts Guild, has been there since the 1970s. It's one of the original occupants of the Arts Collective. This gallery has amazing examples of what one can do with fiber arts. There's a lot of work made with wool. So there's a lot of items that are felted, such as these amazingly detailed hats. There's knitted headbands with appliques on them. There's woven goods. There's also things that are sewn, tapestry. I had a really great time wandering through and taking in what the best fiber artists in the area can do. They certainly have a high level of skill, which I found very inspiring. The Alexandria waterfront is a great place to be on a summer's day, where you can see boats and the Potomac River. And when it's hot, you can sit in the shade of a local park. It's fun to see the signage of long ago businesses on these old buildings. The cobblestones of Captain's Row definitely give that old vintage feeling. And these houses here once belonged to the captains of ships that took tobacco from Alexandria to ports across the ocean. This house's door is still lit by gas flames. One of George Washington's many roles was a landlord. Here's the famous Hollinsbury Spite House, built to fill in an alleyway, perhaps where loiterers gathered, annoying the homeowner on the other side. This plaque above the Spite House's door is the emblem of a fire insurance company. Many of the houses in Alexandria have them. On King Street, the main shopping thoroughfare of Alexandria, you can find the Stitch Sew Shop, a great place to go for all your sewing needs. On my visit, I decided to pick up some fabric for a blouse I'm thinking of making. This area also features a cheese and wine shop, a chocolate store, and a gelato shop, which of course required some indulging in. Let's take a tour of Fibre Space, my favorite local yarn shop. I found it, of course, because it does happen to be the yarn shop that is most convenient for me to visit whenever I feel a need to go pet the wool or pet the yarn, so to speak. But it is truly a really great knitting store. They have a wonderful collection of brands of yarn that they carry. Many of the brand names that you see in Ravelry as the chosen yarn for that designers like to work with are carried there. So for example, they have Spin Cycle and Woolfolk, Manos del Uruguay. I could go on. They are also a wonderful collection of hand dyers such as Miss Babs and Hazelknits and Nerd Strings. You know, anything that you could possibly need for your knitting pleasure is for sure within Fibre Space. And as I mentioned before, just, you know, it's always fun to go in and just go through box by box and pull out skeins and see what's in there and get inspired to perhaps make something. But they also, of course, have great samples so you can see how things knit up. And in fact, when I was there, they had one of Olga Jazzy's shawls as a sample, and it was, you know, I had seen that show up on my Instagram feed, but it was really cool to see it in person. What I also appreciate is that they have a great set of notions. I mean, they have all the basics there, all the, you know, Addy needles and the Haya flyers, for example, or just, you know, Clover, or the, you know, the basic yarn, needles, and notions brands that you expect. But they also have Cocoa Knits notions, which I have found always to be really well designed for the knitter in mind. They are a little bit more pricey than some other of the notions makers, but sometimes it's worth it. What I also got this time when I was there are these Floops stitch markers. On Fibre Space's Instagram feeds, I am frequently seeing that they're saying, we have these back in stock, because apparently they sell out quite quickly. And I also got these flocks, which are made by Floops. They can be used as stitch markers, and they can also be used as cable needles. And in fact, let's open one up. I haven't really played with these yet. But you know, as some of you know, I am team cable needle. But they can be a bit clunky, particularly when making socks. And so I was thinking if I was going to make cabled socks, these would be perfect. And see, they're like on wire, and you can use them to hold. That is really cool. All right. Those are going to be fun to play with. Okay. The other thing about Fibre Space is that it is a real anchor for the knitting community in Northern Virginia. They have lots and lots of knitting classes for beginners, but they also take on advanced topics such as brioche. You can learn to crochet there, and even how to spin a spindle. Their staff are also wonderful, always friendly, always taking time to listen to your question, try and figure out solutions, recommend the best yarns. I have always really appreciated all the help I've gotten from the staff at Fibre Space. I'd like to share with you one of my favorite discoveries that I've made at Fibre Space, which is the yarn Camper by Kelborn Woolens. Kelborn Woolens is an American yarn brand which makes the most beautiful 2-ply fingering weight for color work. I love to Fair Isle. I haven't really been showing it much yet on this channel, but last summer I was totally into Fair Isle. And I wanted to create a hat called, I think it's called Katie's Cap, which had been a previous hat from a Shetland Wool Week. At the time, I didn't know that, but I had found a hat on Ravelry that I really thought looked cool to make. So of course I headed over to Fibre Space and help me, ask for help to find the right yarn, and they pointed me in the direction of Kelborn Woolens. So this is the first hat I made with that pattern. Now, of course, I happen to love the color pink, in addition to red. And the pattern, it's pretty, and I like it, but it actually, I just felt like something wasn't quite right. But I had enough yarn left over that I made another one with an oatmeal background, and I think this one is much better. Just the way that the pattern pops against the neutral background. But now I began to have a collection of this Camper fingering weight. A lot of Fair Isle, I'm thinking in particular of the designs of Marie Wallen, are made with Shetland wool in mind, and that's great. But these colors and this wool is so really nice and soft. Makes me think that anything designed for, say, Jameson Spindrift, or I think it's the other one is, I think, just called 2-ply jumper weight, is something that I could make with Camper. And I bought more colors and made this wonderful set of mittens for my sister-in-law, who's very fond of Frida. So I thought these would be fun to make for her. But I hope to continue to grow my collection of Camper. The colors are slightly heathered, so that's like their purple, this is their red, and they just really, this is kind of like I forget what the color is, but it's a heathery blue. They're really just gorgeous. Here's a green, and when you put, for example, the green and the pink next to each other, you can see the reflection of the pink, like in the green, and there's just little bits of, they just really mesh well together. So I am hatching a plan to do a more extensive Fair Isle work with my Camper. I kind of feel like if I collect all the colors, it becomes almost like having a painter's palette, but with knitting. Anyway, I just love how a visit to your local yarn shop can inspire one to do some wonderful things. And now it's time for some show and tell. I of course cheated a little bit because I showed you some finished objects already, but those were from last year. My most recently completed finished object is one of the skeins for my sweater spin. Some of you who have watched my show before may be aware that I was participating in the Tour de Fleece, and I am also participating in Andrea Mowry's Spin the Weekender cowl. So this skein of wool is for that. It is 100% Targhee, which I bought on Etsy from Julie Spins. I'll put a link to the shop down below. So what I am going for is a worsted weight wool that is should work well in a sweater that was designed on Brooklyn Tweed's shelter. So I'm really happy with how the greens and pinks are coming together. Now I'm a new spinner, and there are places, of course, where it is a bit uneven, but I am not unhappy, and this spin is ongoing. It's probably going to take me a bit of time. But the cowl is going on for a year, so I should be able to have everything completed and knit up by then. Of course, the next work in progress I have to show you is my Curdock cardigan. The pattern is by Andrea Feller, and the wool is her Elasta. So it really now is looking like a cardigan. That's the sort of the front, and that is the back. Thanks to all of you who have responded about some of the mistakes I made and so forth, and some tips and tricks. I really appreciate it. I have one sleeve fully completed, and I am almost done with the second. So I am feeling quite confident that I am going to have this sweater finished by the end of August. And it is fitting great so far. So that is my my Curdock cardigan. Another work in progress is my mom's headband. In my last episode, I mentioned that I was trying to figure out what pattern I was going to work on. Now, I have a bit of a story to tell. I was really partial to the one that was in a honeycomb brioche. And in fact, that's the one that my mom liked the most too. And many of you chimed in the comments on that episode that the honeycomb brioche was your favorite pattern as well. So I went to work trying to cast it on and knit the brioche honeycomb. Well, I found out that brioche is it's just not something you can just pick up. I have been fairly lucky in that, like for example, two-handed Fair Isle came pretty easy to me. Cabling came pretty easy to me, so long as I pay attention to what I'm doing. Brioche, you can't just pick up a brioche pattern and kind of study it, look at a couple YouTubes, and think you can just start. I must have cast on like 5 or 6 times, tried to do the pattern and then realize I had the wrong stitches somewhere along. I had messed up. I couldn't figure out where, and so well, I guess one might say I gave up. But I realized that I think I am going to really have to take a class on brioche and really spend some time getting some focused skills with that technique. Do you brioche? Do you enjoy knitting brioche? How did you learn to do brioche? Did you teach yourself or did you take a class? Now, Fibre Space takes a brioche class, but it hasn't worked well with my schedule just yet. I am looking at Nancy Marchant's class on Craftsy. She, of course, is known as sort of the mother of brioche. And so I am going to really learn brioche in a more focused way. But for now, what I did is I found a pattern on Ravelry that's very similar to that headband I looked at last episode, but instead it's made in seed stitch. And I have cast on. This is the beginning of it. And the yarn is Town yarns. I got this in Dublin, Drury DK, part cashmere. And this is what I've done so far. And it is knitting up so pretty. I just love the way the colors are pooling. I think those greens are just gorgeous. So I haven't given up on brioche, but it's just not happening right now, just yet. So we've come to the end of this episode of Yarn Journeys. If you enjoyed today's show, please do give it a like by clicking on the thumbs up button down below. And if you want to be sure that you don't miss another episode of Yarn Journeys, please do click on the subscribe button. Our next episode will be a little bit further afield from my hometown of DC. So you won't want to miss that. Until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.